I'm Christopher Blakeslee. I'm writing a book with former Mayo Clinic Dr. Jim Lemons about dealing with chronic health problems. I'm also training to become a functional health coach with Chris Kresser's Adapt Academy, and will begin taking clients with autoimmune disease later in 2020. Please visit my website, www.balancehealthcoach.com, where you can sign up for my email list, and I'll send you updates on my book progress and a resource guide I've made for chronic health issues. You can find the address in the description below and at the end of this video. I've had autoimmune diseases for 34 years and was disabled because of them for the last 15 years. I lost almost everything important to me and lived in excruciating pain for more than a decade. I saw every kind of practitioner and tried every protocol that had a shred of validity to it, all to no avail. There seemed to be no way to recover. Now, thanks to my application of functional and lifestyle health principles, the neuroscience of pain, and my motivation to never give up, I'm healthy and have a wonderful and vibrant life. Let's examine my journey from the beginning. The roots of my health difficulties started in childhood. My story shows how much a chronic health issue can take from someone who is thriving, and what all one can overcome when correctly addressing even a severe chronic health problem. This video is a summary of my story. The full version that explores everything I had to overcome, physically and emotionally, will be in my book. I was happy from the first. I was adored and cared for by my family, had a generally benevolent outlook, and was both a joy to be around and a deeply caring boy. But it wasn't long before symptoms of autoimmune disease emerged and began to sap my happiness and enjoyment of life. At age 6, I developed migraines and had my first symptoms of interstitial cystitis, IC, an autoimmune disease that causes bladder inflammation. It manifested in me with pain from anything involving the genitourinary system. The symptoms came and went for years, and I managed to stay pretty happy, was a great student, and was very popular. My exuberance for life showed in most everything I did, but the stresses of growing up intensified the symptoms, and I had some very difficult times and a growing state of anxiety. I developed a potent case of irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, when I was 10, that further amplified my discomfort and nervousness. I memorized where every bathroom was and was ready to dash off without warning when symptoms arose. My parents made arrangements with my teachers to permit me to go to the bathroom at any time. Soon after, I developed exercise-induced asthma and stopped exercising as vigorously as I used to. My parents took me to doctors throughout my childhood, but they couldn't find anything wrong. All antibiotic treatments were unhelpful and further impaired my gut health. First, I lost confidence in doctors. I learned to distrust treatment, and since I could find no other way of coping, I began ignoring and pushing through my symptoms as best I could. Next came a loss of trust in myself. Chronic health problems are insidious. When they're a slow creep, like mine were, it's hard to see the deterioration. I didn't notice that my energy, happiness, and self-confidence were slowly seeping out. It became impossible to trust myself to function when symptoms could erupt and wreck a day, and I increasingly couldn't keep up physically with my peers. Then, my peers noticed and started pouring on the criticism, further impacting my self-esteem. The joyful, happy, popular boy who excelled in school first became blank, followed by growingly fearful and a socially awkward and pudgy teen as I became increasingly sedentary from the discomfort and pain of my symptoms. I started to believe I was fundamentally and inexplicably flawed, since no expert had an idea what was wrong with me. That stress compounded my health problems through an inflammatory biochemical cycle. In 1995, my IC symptoms became chronic. I lived with constant symptoms for more than the next 2 decades. The emergence of these symptoms was devastating to my self-esteem. Puberty and being a teenager is hard enough without having constant genital pain. I chewed on my thumbnails until I couldn't touch them from pain, and the remnants were so soft they would squish and bleed when pressed. Before long, symptoms of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue settled in, and I began to hurt all over. My stress levels were constant, and my pain continued to intensify. I continued like this for years and became known as the sick kid for continually missing long periods of high school. College was more the same symptom-wise, but some of my stress melted away when I moved into an apartment with my brother and saw that I was capable of taking care of myself and becoming increasingly independent. I walked to school every day and became more fit. I reapplied myself to school now that I could choose to study the subjects I found interesting, and I excelled. The pain of my multiple conditions was increasing, but I put a smile on my face and became more outgoing, making many friends, and feeling happier again. But I was still scared and hiding the embarrassing symptoms of IC and IBS. I kept building a virtuous cycle of success as I progressed through college. I finished with a 3.93 GPA in my English major. Despite the constant and growing pain, I regained my confidence and my stress levels dropped. I developed big dreams of becoming a successful novelist. I was very sociable, and I rediscovered all of my warmth and kindness. My nephews were born, and I continually traveled to help raise them for the first 2 years of their lives. But I had no idea what was on the horizon for me. I would only see them twice in 14 years after that. I pushed through intense pain to bulk up through weight training, and I felt like I was reaching my peak, like I had everything going for me, which made the coming rapid fall much harder. I built all this success on gritting my teeth through physical and emotional discomfort, and I was on the verge of collapse from plowing ahead. At age 24, the pain became so great that I was sweating at all times, and I felt like crying out from the pain with urination and sex. I finally told those closest to me about the constant burning and dull pain throughout my pelvic floor and abdomen. They were stunned. They couldn't believe anything was wrong with me because I went over 14 years without showing it or telling anyone about my chronic symptoms. I began treatment with antibiotics for an illusory condition called non-bacterial prostatitis, and despite the pain, I improved my fitness with considerable success. But 12 days after that photo, I was diagnosed with chronic pelvic pain syndrome. 3 months later, I could no longer push through my pain to exercise, and when I could find no substitute in yoga or any other stretching that I tried for a year, I abandoned my efforts at physical improvement. I had some powerful tears over thinking I was in so much pain all the time that I could no longer improve my body, and what that might mean for my future. But I have never been a quitter. I only cried for an hour. Then I decided that if I couldn't improve my body, I was going to work endlessly on my mind. For 14 hours per day, I watched TV programs on history, played some video games, and I spent an increasing amount of time reading philosophy. As the symptoms continued, I began studying health to find an explanation for what was wrong with me. I started recording a daily log of my symptoms that I maintained for every year of my disability to find clues to how I could better manage the symptoms. Despite my efforts, I devolved into a world of excruciating pain and 15 years of horrific disability, which I did not imagine was possible. My nervous system became so overwhelmed from constant, intense pain that I began to hurt from television, video games, and music. In a short period, the jolts of pain became unbearable. With further distress, I gave up all 3 activities. I poured all of my efforts into reading with a focus on health. In January of '06, via bladder cystoscopy, I finally received a diagnosis of a severe case of IC. Brace yourself for this next part. These are the photos of my prostate and bladder. My prostate has the dark red area in the bottom right, and the other 3 images, resembling Jupiter's moon Europa, are of the inside of my bladder. Those reddish areas aren't supposed to be there. My diagnosis meant that I had symptoms, but not why I had them. The treatment didn't help. My pain continued to increase, and every part of my body began to fall apart as the root causes of my dysfunction went untreated, and I continually became more idle. In less than a year, I became very deconditioned, and my health was rapidly deteriorating. My dog, Archie, became my constant companion. My only time standing was 15 minutes per day to play with him. Soon, My nervous system hypersensitivity intensified, and the pain spread to reading and talking, but I was unwilling to give up such things at first. Scanning my eyes across a screen caused the pain from reading to worsen, and sitting in chairs would cause me intense discomfort, so I resorted to printing online health information to read. It wasn't enough. Due to not realizing the pain reading was still causing during a period of high stress, I developed intense nausea with vomiting and diarrhea that lasted an entire month. I ate no solids and lost and gained a total of 40 pounds. After I found a better balance with reading, I stepped up my study of health when I saw the IC treatments failing. I tried more outlandish options for my symptoms and conditions. I began to regularly reach a threshold where I would get so much pain from reading and talking that I would retreat for relief to my bedroom and total silence for a day or more. With my desperation increasing, in '08, I agreed to surgery for a spinal stimulator implant to try and interrupt the signals from my nerves. The stimulator made the sensations and pains worse. A few months after the surgery, the pain flare-ups from reading and talking became so regular that I started narcotics with a pain clinic so that I could read full-time. Years went by. I became increasingly depressed, angry, and fixated on my pain. My symptoms multiplied, and it felt like I developed a new, weird, permanent one each month, and my body kept breaking down. Eventually, reading, talking, and even the heat of my dog near me became too painful for my nervous system. I paused my health studies and committed to experimenting with isolation for almost a year to try and calm down the runaway pain cycle. I only saw my parents and only left the house for medical appointments. Some days I would allow myself an hour or two out of my bedroom, but I spent most others in my room, save for bathroom trips. I laid in bed in the dark with earplugs and a white noise machine running, doing my best to stay motivated and convinced that there was some way to improve. I kept my spirits up, thinking if I couldn't figure out my situation, a doctor or scientist eventually would if I survived long enough. I'd envision how I'd make the most of my life if I ever got it back, occasionally jotting down an idea for a novel series and working on improving the clarity of my thinking. Each day, my mother would bring me 2 meals to eat in minimal lighting, and I'd talk to her or my dad for a few minutes. Twice, when my pain was great, my plight and what I was missing in life overwhelmed me. I cried when I heard my parents watching a movie, and when I could tell my dog was sleeping by my door, blocking the sliver of light under it. The retreat helped at times, but I grew more sensitive without stimuli, and I continued to deteriorate physically. I surrendered and emerged when I developed relentless occipital and trigeminal nerve burning from lying prone. Unless I was utterly exhausted, I couldn't take pressure on my head due to the pain it would trigger, and I had to sit all my waking time for the next decade. I moved on, despite the added ailments. I sought more health research and went on a protocol to address possible root causes simultaneously. I saw gains for a year, but ended up in worse pain than before because the plan was missing some critical concepts, and I began moving more. This devastated me. I knew this method was my best chance at improvement, and I was mistakenly certain that it failed. The increased pain from becoming more active and subsequent near-total idleness, the effects of medications on my mind and body, and the depression of feeling failed by the right method brought me to living hell. From 2012 to 17, I had an endless downward spiral into deepening agony with unending pain of such intensity that it is difficult to fathom and to communicate. My pain continually edged upward as I became more deconditioned and my pain threshold lowered. I gained weight rapidly and felt so bad and was so ashamed of how I looked that I rarely allowed photographs. I'd still try and smile in those photos. Most of the time, I couldn't smile. Laughter caused sweating and excruciating pain in my face and abdomen. I stopped cutting my hair or shaving due to the trigeminal pain that touching my face would cause. I would only shower every 2 weeks to avoid the pain of standing and scrubbing. When I could, I studied new health research and tried supplements and other treatments. My problems were so complex that my symptoms and daily logs became demoralizing. I never saw a trend of improvement, only decline. Symptoms continually emerged. I began to dread that task. My attempts at addressing the triggers made my pain worse and felt doomed whatever I did, further harming my efficacy. I tried dozens of medications to see if they would reverse the trend. For years, I was on 15 prescriptions simultaneously, including muscle relaxers and both short and long-acting narcotics on rising dosages. I could engage in more activities on those dosages, but my pain crept up, and I began having periods where I struggled to concentrate. I blamed the pain, not considering my mind might be numbed by medications and inundated by side effects. In 2014, after a few more years of minimal stimuli and no results, and recovering from pneumonia, I lost my patience. In my deprived and increasingly medicated state, I figured if I felt miserable, was fat on a proper diet, and couldn't get better by avoidance, I deserved some positives for a bit. I welcomed back some days full of TV and video games and some off-diet foods. It felt good, for a while. In late 2015, I continued to worsen, and in the fog of medications, I became indulgent and forgot about getting better for long periods. I traded part of my diet and abstention for sweets and watching TV and playing video games half the day. My pain rose to intense levels with the changes. The pain wouldn't calm down, no matter how much I rested and abstained. I had lost my last coping tool. Then, I injured my neck from reading and lived in a permanent torturous state previously limited to the worst flare-ups. There was no conscious refuge for me. Every second was searing, stabbing, and throbbing from my pelvic floor, neck, head, and abdomen. I had a grievous vibrational sting that would turn to a cold and wet sensation through my lower legs, waist, shoulders, neck, and entire head. I felt like I was always wearing wool socks, a turtleneck, and a mask, all made of fire. I constantly dwelled in a pain range of 7 to the mind-stopping, unable to speak, 9 and 10. I felt like I was screaming inside at all times, but I wouldn't cry or scream because using any muscle would increase my pain. The constant pain and medication side effects drove my mind into a frenetic speed, and I had great difficulty concentrating. I would spend hours frustratingly redoing easy tasks until I got them right. I dreaded eating because of the inflammatory symptoms chewing caused and led me to think that I had a sensitivity to everything. My eyes were so dry and the lenses so impaired that my eye doctor was considering surgery. I sweated endlessly and stunk acridly. All the doctors had to offer, and what I wanted, was more potent medications and dosages to get an hour or two away from the pain I could no longer tolerate. I cheated more on my diet for momentary sugar highs to distract from the pain, and I gained around 50 pounds. I don't know the total amount. I became too depressed and saw no end to the downward spiral to weigh again after hitting 242, but I know I got heavier. The only thing I looked forward to was falling asleep. When I would wake, I would have great distress and try for hours to go back to sleep to escape the pain. I hurt so much, it took me many hours to get exhausted enough to pass out. I began falling asleep sitting up, and my wakeful periods became an average of over 20 hours. This is the result of living through that period. With no other recourse, I fell into a manic busyness to avoid thinking about the pain, but by engaging in activities that increased the pain. Then I would crash and retreat to my bedroom, and I'd either read or think nonstop. I was almost entirely physically idle, but my mind never was, dwelling in a constant, frenzied state of fight or flight, driving up my stress and pain levels more. It kept getting worse. The pain lasted longer until my wakeful periods were regularly over 30 hours. It's bizarre to have no reference point for one's days. I would wake up at wildly different times. One time 8 a.m., the next 5 p.m., It was perplexing to keep a calendar in mind, and it created a sense of perpetual chaos in my life. I'd lose track of how long I'd been awake when I saw the sun or moon cycle a second time during the same wakeful period. It made me feel like there was nothing I could control. All I could do was rely on help from my parents. I felt useless and trapped. I couldn't approximate how happiness or hope felt. I hurt so much that I became less mobile than ever. I sat and wouldn't dare to flinch due to pain increases with any movement. I would only walk to the kitchen once and to the bathroom, roughly 150 steps during a day. I delayed my bathroom visits to spare an extra trip and put off the intense pain I would have in there. In time, I lost almost 3 inches of my height from being stuck in the same sitting position over 90% of my wakeful periods. In 2016, I became so desperate that I pursued a risky measure, an immunosuppressant drug, on the theory that it would stop the autoimmune attacks on my body. I knew I was in trouble because I finally felt like it was my last resort. I had tried dozens of treatment protocols and didn't have any plausible leads left. I tried the drug for about 2 months, but I was worsening. With each passing week, I was becoming more afraid that it wasn't going to work with this last option, further amping up the cycle of stress and inflammation in my body. On the night of January 16, 2017, I reached the climax of my poor health and side effects from the load of medications I was on. I got terrifying new symptoms. I hallucinated black spots, sweated intensely, and shivered violently for 8 hours with surges of pain. I feared for my life. My desire to live shocked me out of the haze I'd been in for the previous few years. I realized that the drugs were having powerful side effects if I could get such reactions, that even though I could often think on a high level that mind-altering effects could be the explanation for forgetting to better myself. It was time to examine what else the 15 medications might be doing to me. I had looked up the side effects of every medication whenever I started one, but I didn't know how to analyze them when I already had many of those symptoms. As soon as I woke up that night, I knew it was up to me to change. There wasn't a doctor on the planet who could fix me with what a strange science experiment I had become. I was on high doses of many medications and doing almost nothing the body needed. I thoroughly re-examined the side effects and looked into what micronutrients the drugs were depleting. I was stunned at the deficiencies they could be causing, leading to a myriad of the symptoms I had. I began to think of being in poor health on many pharmaceuticals as a toxic soup, affecting a great many changes throughout my body. I gained hope that over-reliance on medications might be what I overlooked in the past, and I decided to look for other root causes of dysfunction. I had to make lifestyle changes before anything could work. I vowed to recommit to a functional protocol of simultaneously treating everything, to start moving, no matter the pain, to get back on a paleo diet, to do my best to get to bed at regular times, and to reduce my reliance on medications. This was the start of my recovery. I had not been photographed in almost a year. I had already lost about 30 pounds. I was still in great pain, but I was rapidly decreasing my reliance on medications and moving as slowly as possible for 2,000 steps per day on pure willpower. I kept studying health as much as I could, finding small leads that helped me refine the protocol I made. After 7 months, I managed to stop a long-acting narcotic, despite the pain increases. But my progress stalled out. I couldn't break through the pain to move more than 3,000 steps per day. I couldn't figure out how to hold proper posture when just a few seconds would cause me intense aching, and I didn't know how to rebuild from the severe atrophy I endured. This set the stage for the lowest point of my life. I tried for more than a month to lower my morphine dosage under guidance from my pain clinic, but my pain surged to incredible levels. My activity level plummeted, and I was quickly back to doing nearly nothing. I concluded I wasn't ready to stop, and I went back on the medication. My fear rose as I thought I had exhausted my options for improvement. I I felt trapped in an impossible situation of not being able to get off the remainder of my medications to see how I'd be without them, and I couldn't physically progress any further with them. The next blow was brutal. A few days later, a government edict required my pain clinic to take me off of morphine and put me back on a long-acting narcotic. Following my failure to end reliance on my own, I panicked. I knew a long-acting medication wasn't capable of breaking through my pain to bring it to manageable levels, but I had no choice except to stop the drug. This photo was a couple of days before I began that process. My gravely impaired physical and defeated psychological state was a terrible starting point to quit one of the most potent chemicals known to man. As soon as the withdrawal began, my mind became a dungeon of fear, and my pain surged to constant levels I had never experienced. I would alternate between crying and having less energy than I ever have. For several hours, I would sit without moving due to lethargy. For more than a month, I felt like vomiting every time I ate. I had spells where my mind was out of my control. I hallucinated voices. For hours at a time, I doubted everything. I had wild fears and even imagined a traumatic event in my past that never happened to me. I couldn't stand to be alone with my frenzied thoughts. I asked my parents to sit with me and tell me stories about their past during the worst times, so I couldn't have a chance to have another random, irrational thought. My mind was in utter chaos. One day, I saw an image of a gun going off, so I immediately asked my parents to take any possible weapons away from me and to watch over my medication. I wrote an oath to myself to never commit suicide. When it was difficult to write that, and I was upset to take the option from myself, I realized how altered I was because I would never give in to my symptoms. It was a wake-up call to spend every moment I could aligning myself to the good in life and to continually remind myself that these thoughts were the products of chemicals. I devoted myself to making uplifting signs to hang in my bedroom and made a game where I spent hours looking out windows and naming a positive aspect of everything I could see to affirm that values are what have potency in life. The misery went on for 10 weeks. Having survived that, I know that nothing will ever break my spirit. The measures I took were critical, but I desperately needed another option to pull up. Luckily, a few months prior, I was referred to Dr. Jim Lemons at the Lemons Center for Chronic Pain Rehabilitation. I looked up his program and thought that the focus on neuroscience and gentle physical therapy could work, and I'd heard they'd helped others in their reliance on pain medications. But it was 4 hours per day, 5 days per week, for 6 weeks. I had not been able to fulfill a commitment like that in 14 years, so I put off going. But once I was in withdrawal, I realized that I was in a dangerous place with no options. So, 9 months into my recovery, I fearfully committed to attending the program. It was one of the best choices I ever made. The staff of the Lemon Center are my heroes. I've seen firsthand how many individuals they've taught to manage their chronic health conditions and take command of their lives. The program was the final piece of my protocol that led to my return to health. As soon as I heard the explanation of pain from a neuroscience perspective, I knew the program would work. I gave all my effort in implementing the behavioral tools and exercising in the physical therapy program. Here are my visible results from the start and finish of the 6-week program. My trajectory was continually upward from that point. Medication reduction, working to stay parasympathetic, and exercise proper for my limited mobility were the major missing pillars from 2010 to 11. I soon got back out into the world. I went to Galveston Beach just after graduation. A couple of months later, I easily ended my nearly 10-year dependency on narcotics and went for my first trip by myself in my life. I visited my friend in New York City. It was extraordinarily difficult at times, and I lost hours of touring time to rest in my hotel, but I still made it to the Met and was able to walk the entire Brooklyn Bridge. It took me 45 minutes to cross the bridge because I took several breaks, but I made it. 2 months after that, I went and stayed with my brother and his fiancée for 10 weeks. I got off of muscle relaxers for the first time in over 10 years. I managed to attend multiple Houston Rockets NBA playoff games and tolerated the pain from the intense sound effects from the public address system without a flare-up. I got in the ocean for the first time in 16 years. I began challenging myself physically with manual labor in stints of no longer than 30 minutes. As I slowly improved, I pushed my physical limits and extended my working times and movements. 6 months prior, I had climbed into my attic, and due to my weakness, it took me nearly 10 minutes to scoot down the ladder. At this point, I could spend almost 4 hours per day on a ladder vacuuming the walls and ceiling for a home improvement project. It was very difficult and required me to take many breaks with days off in between. I was always working through my pain. There were very difficult times when I went past my limits, and I paid for a few days with high pain. I kept getting healthier and traveling. Soon, I was cooking dinner and dessert for 10 of my friends without any help, and enjoying the outdoors more often. I still had room for improvement. My posture wasn't proper. I was still favoring one side over the other. Gradually, I was able to spend more time studying health and exercising. I kept discovering more ways to improve myself and adding to my protocol. Most of the progress was subtle. I was still in constant pain that would limit my activity level for hours at a time, but I continued to grow toward mastery of symptom management to prevent the pain from ever climbing as high as it did in the past. Then, my pain lessened further with deeper experimentation with fasting, and I quickly began to get leaner. I began to feel well enough to socialize often. I danced in public for the first time in my life. I was amazed to discover after a year of training listening to music that I could attend a 3-hour rock concert without having a symptom flare-up. I became confident enough in my health to begin scouting to move out of my parents' house. I began to swim and built up to 3 sessions per week. I started to have a semi-regular nightlife playing pool. With the confidence that I had identified the root causes of my health problems, and as the symptoms became transient and increasingly manageable, I said farewell to the miserable past with a cathartic bonfire of all my old symptom journals. I got over the burning pain and dryness in my eyes to wear contacts again for the first time in 15 years. Now, I feel amazing for almost every part of every day. My pain and other symptoms are still present, but a background nuisance. I can say with complete confidence that I am healthy. My lab markers are excellent, and I can do anything I want, physically and mentally. I live my life like a kid on Christmas. Here's how far I've come. I've healed enough that I no longer need an autoimmune protocol diet. I completed 7 5-day water-only fasts in the past 9 months to calm my remaining pain. I'm only on 2 medications at minuscule doses with plans to quit both shortly. My physical fitness has also greatly progressed. I regained all of my height through the stretching and strengthening program I started at the Lemon Center. I've lost around 100 pounds. I weigh 154 at present. I got down to 144, but I added about 10 pounds of muscle after hitting that low. In my most active week, I walked 16,237 steps per day, which is 50.5 miles. I have a high step count of 30,086 in one day, which is over 13 miles. I can run 10 sprinting intervals of 20 seconds. I can swim 22 laps in a pool with only short breaks. 38 months ago, I could barely stand up. Now I stand 80% of the day. I went from doing 0 push-ups to 79 in 1 set and 342 in 5 sets. I couldn't do any squats either, and now I can do 52 in a set and 250 in 5 sets. I went from doing 0 dips to 70 in a set, and I've just begun weight training again after 15 years of being unable to. I got my life back, and now I can do this. There you have it. I feel like I'm my best self now in my 3rd year of recovery, and I'm still getting better. I'm looking forward to finishing my book with Dr. Lemons. In the book, I discuss my full story, the principles of functional and lifestyle medicine, the neuroscience of pain, and the cognitive and behavioral tools needed to manage and thrive through health problems. I also show how I applied all these fundamental health principles to give others an idea about how to personalize the management of their health context. I decided to write this book so that a lack of knowledge will never again allow someone to sink to the levels of misery and despair that I did, or even deeper. I hope that the book will help others find a path to better health or to achieve freedom as I have. In my experience, my study of functional and lifestyle health, and work with Dr. Lemons, I've seen there is remarkable hope for the treatment and management of chronic health problems. It's time for a revolution. If you found this video valuable, please click like and subscribe to my channel. I plan to make more videos on chronic health management in the future. Again, please visit my website, where if you sign up for my email list, I'll send you updates on my book progress and a resource guide I've made for chronic health problems. I'm excited to see clients for my coaching business later in 2020 to work directly to help others discover their optimal paths forward. Have a fantastic day, and may you achieve your best health.